player for England. It's crazy. Will, Roberto said something interesting there in terms of he's versatile, but it doesn't matter about his versatility. Where does Phil Foden actually fit into this England team? When you get all the attackers lined up, you got the right wings, the left wings, the tens. Where does he actually fit into this team?
Yeah, that's the thing. If everybody's fit, just based off the performances for England, he doesn't fit in. But I kind of have to blame the managers that England have had, because if you look at a player like Phil Foden, right? It's like you said, KJ. We could, like, if you're gonna speak objectively, right? Because I know that people like to troll. Everybody has like this tribalism, but objectively speaking, right? I think everybody here on the panel would agree that Phil Foden is a very good player, right? Like, when we look at the abilities that he is a very good player, right? Like let's not act like just be. But the thing that annoys me is the whole narrative of beating him over the head with he's a system player, or he like that Pep system. Every 99% of players in world football are system players. If they're not in the right system, then they're not going to look as good as they could. I think for England, right, underneath Gareth Southgate, they were playing that haram ball for 8 years, right? I know that you guys made a couple of finals, but ultimately you didn't win anything. And I feel like if the system was a little bit better, right, if the system allowed him to maybe have a little bit more time like on the ball and whatnot, I do believe that you get the best out of him. Now, I think to say that he's a guaranteed like lock in for England's 11, I don't agree with that, because I think when Saka is fit, I think Saka needs to be on that right wing. And then we saw in the Euros that when Foden was on the left, he was obsolete out there as well. So I don't think that there is just a locked on spot for Foden. I don't think that if everybody's fit, there's a place in the side for Foden, because on the left wing, I think that at this point you would rather have like Anthony Gordon because of his pace and maybe can get in behind on the defense. Maybe that'd work a little bit better. So I feel like he should be dropped, but I get why the English media believe that he needs to be a part of that England 11 more times than not because of what he's doing in the Premier League. And we know that there's that English bias in terms of, well, if you're one of the best players in the Prem, then you're one of the best players in the world. So make it work for the national team. But I think that he should be dropped, though, from that 11, 100%, if everybody's fit. But I don't necessarily see a clear-cut position where you can say, like, that's Foden's spot. If that makes sense.
There isn't one.
Yeah.
I mean, we were out in Germany for the Euros, KJ. England got to the final. He had one good game, and that was Holland in the semi-final. That was the only good game Phil Foden had in an entire tournament. Jude Bellingham was the player of the tournament, and Jude Bellingham, or England's player of the tournament, should I say, and Jude Bellingham had to go out to the left to accommodate Foden to try and get anything out of him for the final couple of games. Southgate wasted his best player out on the left-hand side to accommodate Foden, and still, bar one game against Holland, got nothing out of him. It comes to a point, look, Phil Foden is a very good footballer, but maybe he just doesn't suit international football at this point. Maybe there's just a part of him that isn't made for the style of football England want to play. England look better when they have wingers on the wing. Therefore, you don't really want Foden out on the wing. But Phil Foden, he could play the rest of his career, and he wouldn't have the England career that Jude Bellingham has already. And Jude Bellingham's played 2 tournaments. Like that's the level of quality. Like that's the level Jude Bellingham has shown so far. And Foden hasn't stepped up.
Like when Kane drops deep, he needs runners in behind. Like the reason why, if you think back to the previous Euro,
Bellingham can run in behind though. Bellingham just wasn't put in a position to run in behind.
I'd rather Gordon or Rashford go out on the left because they've got the pay.
Yeah, that was what I was saying. You need a winger out on the left. Not what Foden wants. You can't have too many players in your attack, especially when you have Kane, who want the ball to feet. You need some guys who are quite happy to make the runs in behind and to stretch that defense. And England don't have that. If they play Foden, if they play Foden, Saka, and Kane, Palmer. Bellingham, if that's their front four, Saka can do it, but he's a mixture of both. Foden wants ball to feet. Kane wants ball to feet. Bellingham's a mix of both, but he's probably the most willing guy to run in behind.
Crash to go.
He's the most willing to run in behind.
Yeah,
but that's the problem. It's not a solid dynamic. If you then put Gordon there, you've got the dynamic.
But you know the thing is though, and I think like being an England man, well, just international manager, not even England, just in general, like it's because with international football, you don't get a chance to like implement a style of play per se, because you're only with these players a few times out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So now when it's time for international duty, you get like 1 or 2 training sessions, but like you're not implementing a system, right?
But will
You're
the
just
all
trying to
play
pick
the
the
all
best
playing?
11.
But bar Jude, every England player at that tournament played in the same league, and whether we like it or not, the Premier League, the style of the league, and the level of team that these guys played in, all played with the same principles and with the same philosophies and with the same, build up patterns and the
Is
same
that true, though?
structures. Right, so I'm looking at the players that played. Defense isn't really that relevant for build up structure, but you had
Yeah.
Stones, who played at City 3-2-5, 2-3-5, whatever. Walker, Trippier played at Newcastle.
Guay plays in the back three for
Gay played in the back three
Alex.
for Palace, who build up in a 3-2-5. In midfield, Declan Rice at Arsenal done the same thing. When Mainu got in, it wasn't Trent at DM. Same thing. Players who build up in pivots. And as you got forward, Saka plays in a 3-2-5. Kane at Bayern played in a similar thing. Foden at City played in a similar thing. Jude's probably the one who didn't necessarily play in it, but Jude is that good a footballer that it doesn't really matter. He can just adapt his role to anything. They all played with the same principles, but yet they went to England and completely abandoned principles and went to play a style of football that the English Premier League hasn't been associated with since 2000, since the early 2000s, of rigid, defensively sound counter-attacking football. The Premier League is full of some of the best teams in the world who dominate possession on a weekly basis. So play to their strengths. That's what I think Tuchel will hopefully for England fans, start to be doing, playing to their strengths, having more possession, having a set style of build-up which tries to overload opposition rather than waiting to hit them on a counter-attack and relying on pure individual brilliance.
But I feel like Tuchel is more of like a pragmatic manager, though. Like, as in, like, he likes to be defensively sound.
No, but
first.
pragmatism doesn't necessarily mean part of the bus every game. You know what I mean? Like that pragmatism is more towards I'm willing to change depending what my opponent is. And
pragmatism is trying to neutralize your opponent rather than just sticking with your style of play through thick and thin.
Yeah,
Tuchel will adapt certain things, but I think he wants to build up in the same way every time.
Yeah, and I think with the opposition that we're going to face in like the World Cup qualifiers, and apparently there's a rumor of this 4-way tournament between England, Jamaica, Ghana, and Nigeria.
Yeah.
If that happens, get me to Wembley, bro, because that's gonna be flipping crazy. I'll be here for that. But we're going to be facing teams in the build up towards the World Cup, I believe, that will be more about stopping England from attacking. So from there, Tuchel needs to find a way to make all of that work. And unfortunately, on paper, it looks like, put Foden in there. He's used to play against low blocks. He's playing with players that know how to pass the ball and keep the ball in front of the defense. But in reality, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Thank you, Luke Skywalker, for the super chat. Everyone hit that like button in the chat. Also, he says, big up to KJ and the panel. Yes, thank you, Luke. We appreciate that indeed. We got some comments here saying the 4 absolute starters are Kane, Bellingham, and Saka. And I don't think anyone here can really disagree, especially...
And Pickford.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if David was here, he wouldn't agree with Rice being a starter. You lot were not there, and Jamie, he would hog the mic for 30 minutes talking about Rice.
Nah, that is true, man. That is true. And then the fact that Henry didn't mention Rice or Saka is a disgrace. It's a disgrace, Henry. I love that.